Hi guys, Adam Cargill here. I see posts all the time, either on the Nation, Swimbait Universe, Underground, wherever. But everybody seems to want to know the best way to rig a HUD. And in my opinion, there is no better way than rigging a HUD with the Butch Brown method. That's the method. His method is by using cable and a small crimp, and it involves a VMC hook. I've changed the way I do it slightly from his exact way, and so I call it a modified Butch Brown. But I'm going to show you guys how to do it. The things you need to make it happen. I keep about a 50-yard spool or 40-yard spool of 65-pound Power Pro in moss green in my tackle box. I keep it on an old spindle for thread, the same spindles that we get for wrapping rods when we buy thread for wrapping rods. The other thing you need is a VMC hook. This is a number. This is, instead of the number 1, which Butch uses, I actually use a number 2, but it's 2x strong. So it's slightly smaller, but it actually has the same wire gauge that the number 1 hook has. You notice this hook, the eye of the hook is in line with 2 points, whereas an owner, it's actually reversed, and the line tie is in line with 1 point. It's super important that you use the hook where the line tie is lined up with the 2 points, because it just makes the hook sit more flush to the bait. It doesn't move as much. It's just the way to do it. Gamakatsu does make 2 times strong hooks, round bend treble hooks, but the problem with them is they're much harder. And when you cut the point off the bottom and try to bend it to create the little barb that goes into the back of the HUD, I've gone through 6-7 expensive hooks just trying to build one, just trying to cut one and bend it in the fashion I need, that with a small enough gap to where I can get the hook to sit as flush as possible on the bait. So that's, it's important to use the VMCs. That there's like Butch says, he wouldn't use a VMC if it wasn't the best hook for the HUD, and it really truly is. That and its color too. It's a very neutral color. You can paint it if you want to make it even look more like hide it more with the bait, I should say. But let's go ahead and get started. The other thing that is critical for this rig is a needle. The needle I use is, it doesn't have a sharp point to it. It does have a nice large eye though, and I use this needle for helping me tie the knot. The knot, is kind of similar to it's similar to a nail knot, a knot that's used for fly fishing. It's also similar to a San Diego jam knot, which is a really popular knot here on the West Coast. Start by taking about 12 inches of 65-pound Power Pro. I run the Power Pro through the hook eye and then even up my tag ends. So I've basically got a double line going from the hook point, from the hook eye, basically a double line of 65-pound Power Pro. I'm going to take both tag ends and pass both tag ends through the line tie on the HUD. That's the first part of it. Once I've done that, I draw the hook up as close to the eye as possible. It's right there. You can see it's touching the eye. I like the hook to be as far forward as possible. With this rig, it sits a little tiny bit further back than if you use the crimping method, just because you're tying a knot and it's hard to get it that tight. I don't mind that, but I do like having the hook as far forward as possible. When you with this big bait in a bass's mouth, when you set the hook, I think that you have the opportunity to open, and as you're setting the hook, the fish's mouth is forced open. I want the hook to be one of the first things coming out. I don't want the bait to come out of his mouth this far and have his mouth be opened. I don't want the bait to come out of his mouth, say, this far, and have up by the dorsal fin, let's say, and have his mouth be open enough to where the hook's not going to catch anything. I want the hook to be one of the very first things that's leaving his mouth, and I think that you get a better hookup ratio in that way. In order to tie the knot, I rest the needle directly on top of the hook, with the eyes, with the needle eye and the hook eye essentially in the same place, flush, parallel. From here, I'm going to take one wrap around the needle and the hook too. You can go around both of them. Basically, it makes it a little easier. It holds it there. But you notice I'm leaving very little space. Here, very, very little space between the hook eye and the line tie. From there, I make 4 turns. I go back down basically, and I make 4 turns around the doubled line, doubled line, I should say. It's about how much room you have when you tie it correctly, because that's how close you want the hook up to the nose of the bait. So I'm going to take 1, 2, 3, 4. And the last 4th turn, I actually bring up around the knot, so it's not flush with the other ones. It's actually coming back and crossing up over the other 3 wraps. Then I simply put the 2 tag ends through the needle eye, and then draw the needle through in order to get those tag ends to come through that very small hole. From there, you just need to tighten down the knot. You just need to work it slowly, making sure that all the lines stay parallel. You don't like crossed up line ever on any knot. You need to pull on the tag end a little bit. You need to also pull on the hook a little bit just to get it to tighten down. But you can see when it's finished, you've got a pretty small package there. I mean, it's, you don't really see anything. It's just a very small knot, and then the 65-pound power per loop going to your VMC hook. Now from here, I cut my tag ends off, and I don't cut them off too closely to the knot. I leave a little bit of room, and I'll show you the reason why here in a second. I cut them off with just a little bit longer tag end than you would say normally for a knot. But then from there, I protect the knot itself with my fingers, and move any parts that are critical for strength away, and protect them underneath my fingers. And I take a lighter and I just burn the ends, burn the tips of that tag end. And what that does is it seals the spectra and allows it to basically keeps it from unraveling. Also, it creates two small little bumps that make it very difficult for this knot to slip. I've never had one slip. I always end up breaking off my main line if I get hung in the rocks. I've never come back without the hook, basically. And you know, disclaimer, I'll say right now, this rig is scientifically proven not to land as many big bass as Butch has with his, just because he's caught that many more big bass. But I have landed 3 fish over 10 pounds using this method, and I'm going to continue to use it forever, as long as I fish a Hudd. From there, I just find the point in the back, just as Butch does, where I can enter the small barb and have the whole package, the whole hook system with the knot lay as flat as possible. Another thing you can do is, if it's a little bit long, you can make a twist or two in the loop just to shorten it up just that much more. And another main thing, another critical thing, is you'll notice on the top of the Hudd there's a seam from the mold. Well, that seam is dead center line, and that's where I want to make sure I insert my barb, because I want the hook to sit exactly in the center of the bait so that it doesn't make it swim in any direction, doesn't make it off balance, so that it's absolutely in the center and top of the bait. So I use that seam line as my guide as to where to push the hook. If I do twist the loop, I try not to twist it more than 1 or 2 times, because I found that the twist will actually force the hook to want to ride to one side more than the other. So I want the twists to be loose enough to where it maintains the hook in the perfect upright position. Another thing I do with this hook before I besides cutting off the bottom point, I also slightly bend the shank up. It's actually really not the shank, it's the throat, but I actually slightly bend them upwards so that the hooks are not necessarily parallel with the angled back of the bait, but rather they're almost facing directly forward. So that's one more thing I do. I just slightly, ever so slightly, bend the hook points up. So, and I believe I just get more gap that way. There's more possibility, or for a better chance for hookup, basically. But that's the rig. That's the modified Butch Brown using 65-pound Power Pro instead of a cable and crimp, and it's I think it's about as clean as you can rig one. Let's see here. I mean, you hardly see any hardware at all. Another great thing to do, and it's really not another nice thing about these VMC hooks, is they're a neutral color. I'll often take a green and black Sharpie marker and color the hook. I usually do black on the bottom and then do green on top in order to be able to get the to really match the color of the back of the bait. But you can see there, I mean, it's a very small hook. It's as big as you need though, really. It's 2 times strong, even though it's only a size number 2, and they pin. I mean, they go all the way. They penetrate. They go all the way in, generally to the roof of the mouth of the fish. Occasionally, I've caught fish here in the corner of the mouth too, but for the most part, when a bass eats a Hudd, he's coming down and he's suction feeding, and he's getting the bait head first, and the bait's often turned around in its mouth. And when you set the hook, that head turns, the head of the bait turns, and what those hooks first get is the top of their mouth, and it's the first thing really that exits the mouth is the hook, because it is up there in that position as opposed to being back here behind the dorsal fin or up here in front of the dorsal fin. And this look to me is just so much more stealth. It's not, there's very limited or a very small number of things that could turn a bass off from eating it. You've got a big black owner hook on there, let's say, a 1/aught or 2/aught. It's just extra hardware, and I think it takes away from the natural look of the lure. And in swim baiting, I think natural and representing the forage and having the least amount of negative cues about the lure is very important in catching the biggest bass in the lake. One other thing you'll notice here, I cut my anal fins just slightly with a pair of scissors, just to get a little bit more action out of them, just a little bit more secondary action out of them as the bait's coming through the water. The other thing I do is I open up both gills with the razor blade, and I prefer to use Berkeley power worms as my gills, Berkeley power trout worms. They need to be cut in half long ways though, with a very sharp razor blade, in order to get the thickness that I like, to make it so it's a really clean look in there, as opposed to having them way pushed out, or and not bulky, not excessive. I want the gills to look like real gills. I mean, they rarely actually show when the fish has its gills closed, or when the trout has its gills closed. But I do think it adds to the realism, and it's in the small Berkeley power trout worm red, the 3-inch worms. Like I said, cut longwise, they really look clean. They really look real. Kind of similar to the gills that you find on a Batesmith Magnum. The other great thing to use for gills is chenille, is pipe cleaner. This pipe cleaner, it's a little thick, I think. It's a little obnoxious. But one thing Butch did teach me is that you can take a lighter to the chenille, and not only does it darken it up and make it a little bit more natural looking as far as the gill colors are concerned, but it makes it smaller. So I'm not taking it too close. I don't want to burn it. I don't want it to turn too much color. But you notice that they got much smaller. Look at this side in comparison to this side after applying just a little bit of heat to it. Got a little bit too close on that one. So now that I've got my chenille prepared, it's shrunken down quite a bit. It's not nearly as thick as it was straight out of the package. It's just more natural looking. It's not bulky. It's not fuzzy. It's just a nice little piece of red accent that you can add to your bait. To put it in, to install the gills, like I said, I've already made my cuts with the razor blade. I'll take and I'll press the point of wire up into the front section of the gill, just slightly, and then I take and I bend it around the shape of the gill itself, so that I know it's just going to be barely visible on the bottom, just barely visible on the bottom of the gill. So I take it around, I get it to the length where I know I'm going to need, and then I cut off just maybe an extra 1/8 of an inch, and use that extra 1/8 of an inch to go up into the other side and kind of lock it in place before I actually super glue it in place. As you can see, I've taken it back out of the gills. I've got my positions marked, and I've got the shape, I've got the contour of the gill already there. So now all I have to do is cut it. Then I'll go back, now that it's been cut and I think I'm got it at the right size. I go back and I reinsert it here just forward of the gill, or at the throat latch basically. I try to maintain my bend that I had. This one I cut a little bit long. I cut it a little bit long. So I'm going to go back and cut just another piece, tiny piece of it off. Got the shape right, make sure it's contoured exactly with the actual gill shape itself. And then I push the piece of wire into the body and plastic of the bait on the other side. You can see there how the gill sits in there now. It's very clean. It's not excessive. It's not. It doesn't look unnatural. It's just a very small red gill line. From there, I'll take and I'll tack it in with super glue because the 2 metal ends of the chenille have been placed in position and are basically embedded into the plastic. All I'll do to secure it is I'll open the gill flap slightly and just add just a couple drops of super glue along the way so that when I close it back down on it, I don't get any extra glue dripping on the bait somewhere, leaving marks on the bait somewhere. But that's basically it. The gills are just so. I mean, they're there. They're as what they would look like on a real fish, as opposed to being over the top, basically. So that's one side. I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. Again, I'm gonna form the chenille, form the pipe cleaner to match the exact shape of the gill outline, of the gill plate cover, basically. And then I'm gonna cut it off at just the right length. And there's the finished product. I mean, just so it needs to come out a little bit more. But there you go, just nice, clean, small red gills, just a little tiny bit of accent. The other thing you'll notice that I do is I cut the pectoral fins. I trace them with a razor blade also. I trace them quite a bit forward, but then I add a dab of super glue. Just one drop of super glue, just a little ways back, and all that does by just adding that little tiny drop of super glue is it prevents the fin from folding itself all the way back into the place that it was originally cut from. So you get just these slight, the pec fins are just slightly protruded. They're not way stuck out there. There's just enough to give just, that little tiny bit more of secondary action that I think can trigger a bite, especially from a big fish. And it's especially nice to have a Hudd with, as long as they've been out now, it's nice to have a Hudd that looks just a little bit different. I really believe that fish get conditioned to lures, and the better your Hudd looks, I think the more opportunity you're going to get get a bite on it. But that's it. That's the finished product. You see how small the hook is, how small the knot is. The hook itself is completely flush with the top of the bait. And you basically have yourself a live rainbow trout there. I mean, it's, you know, what looks more realistic than that? And by using the smaller gill size, by either heating the chenille and taking it down in thickness and diameter, or using Berkeley power worms, Berkeley power trout worms, I think they're even cleaner and better looking. But that's how I fish my Hudds. That's how they all look. And like I said, I call it the modified Butch Brown, because without him inspiring me with his rig, I wouldn't have had this. So this is my modified Butch Brown rigging of a Huddleston Deluxe. Hit me up on Facebook if you guys have any questions or need any help on how to do this. I wouldn't have posted this a year and a half ago. It was something that I held kind of tight underneath the belt because I think my Hudds look better than most people's out there. But now that I'm back fishing the salt professionally, I'm not getting the opportunity to fish in the lakes like I used to, and I figure I better pass along the information so that you guys can catch more big fish. Thanks for watching. I appreciate your guys' time. And like I said, if you got any questions, hit me up on Facebook, Adam Cargill. Talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.